Did you know that there's more than one way to thread a needle? In this video, I'm going to show you all the different ways you can thread a needle, the way that I use the most, and different ways to use thread. Okay, so before we get into actually threading the needle, I'm going to show you how I store the thread. So DMC is by far the best thread out there. You can get a bunch of cheaper ones on Amazon, but trust me, they are not worth it. They fray. And they're just frizzy and they do not look good. So DMC you can find at Michael's, Joann Fabrics, even Walmart has it. A lot of people use these little like white plastic thread holders. I do not like those and I will show you why. So I am going to take my thread, find the end of it, which is always easy with the DMC threads, and I'm going to clip it into a clothespin. Now I just number the clothespin so I know which color. So I just make sure that I have the right number. And then I just wind it all the way up until I get to the end of the thread. I did this with Amazon thread one time and it just was tangled from the beginning. DMC thread, sometimes it'll tangle a tiny bit, but it's usually it just goes back and forth and super easy to wind up. It doesn't take very long. Okay, so got to the end of the thread and I can just leave it hanging a little bit here. So to get different textures and different looks in your embroidery, you can use different size threads. So it all comes like this, but there's actually 6 strands in here. So the most common, which I'm going to use now anyway, is 2. So instead of using all 6, I'm going to take this apart. And so there's 4 on this side and 2 right here. And so this is why I like using the clothespins, because you can just, I usually just put that on my lap and just keep going, right? And then sometimes with those little white plastic thread holders, your thread's going to get tangled. So like it's going to end up looking like that. And so with the clothespin, you can actually take the end of it and hook it here. And then it just makes it easy to unwind it. And so you're just going to keep going until you get as much as you feel like you can handle while stitching. You don't want to like an absolute ton because then it'll get tangled in the back. But you don't want to keep doing this every 2 minutes either. So whatever you think is best, you can always add more as you keep stitching. I switched over to darker thread so that we could see it a little better. And just a reminder, I use size 5 DMC embroidery needles. I just find them to be the perfect size for what I need. You're going to take the end of your thread and make sure you just wet the end a little bit, whether you just stick it in some water or stick it in your mouth quick, just so the end pieces stick together. And then you just loop it right through the needle. So they do make these things here. You just put it in the needle and it's a little bit easier to put the thread through there and pull it through. But it's not necessary. So then you're going to pull it all the way until you find the other end. So now your thread is exactly in half. And I just tie a little knot at the very end. And I double knot it. So now your 2 strands is actually 4 strands. So if you actually want 2 strands, you're going to only pull apart 1, and then when you double it up, it'll be 2. So this is what I use most of the time. It's technically the 4 strands of thread when it's doubled up. All right, so this is just what I find to be the easiest how to thread the needle. So then let's just do 1 stitch here. So when you start, go up, and then it will not go through because of that knot there. And then you can just do your back stitch or whatever stitch that you'd like to do. And then you just keep going. The only thing I do find with this method is that once in a while, like you'll get these little frays if you are doing, say, a chain stitch and you have to go through that. It's a little bit hard if you poke through the middle of the knot, or these little frays will stick through, but it's nothing that can't be easily fixed, and I just prefer it this way. So another way to thread your needle is to start out the same, put the thread right through the little eye in the top, but instead of pulling it in half, you're gonna make it so one end is a lot shorter than the other end. So now this is a 2-strand thread instead of 4. So we'll start the same, just go right up your first stitch. But now that you don't have a knot in the back, you have to be careful not to go all the way through. So you're going to leave about an inch, maybe 2, that much, and kind of just maybe hold it with your finger. Then you're going to go down 1 stitch. And then you're going to do 1 more stitch here. And then again, be careful not to go all the way through. So now you're going to have a little loop in the back. What you want to try to do is get this piece to go through that loop. And then you can pull that loop. So now it's kind of holding it there. And you can kind of keep going with that if you wanted to. So you could again make sure that this end piece is under this loop. Before you pull it tight. And then that's pretty secure. You can pull it and it's not going to go anywhere. So this method is good for if you need your back to look really smooth, or maybe on clothing if you want it to just be a little bit more smooth. The thing with this is this piece is now free. There's no knots holding this thread onto this needle. So you could just, keep pulling and pulling and pulling and it'll come off. And it usually does if you forget to hold it in place while you're stitching. Not a big deal. You can always just put it back on. It's just not my favorite. I like the knots a little bit better, but it's up to you. Both are good for different reasons. Okay, now that you have your supplies, you have your needle threaded, I'm going to show you how to transfer your pattern onto the fabric in the next video.